Now we've got Mr. Frank Ehiosu, an author of many books and a policy analyst. We're going to be looking at agitations for restructuring and addressing concerns by ethnic nationalities. Now in Nigeria, there are so many ethnic nationalities, and of course it's been an age issue. Talking about the agitations for resource control, the agitations for more states creation, and of course, the agitation for national presence in various states, and the agitation for one or two items in various states. Now, the most recent of it all has been the agitation by IPOB. That's the people, the independent people of Biafra, and of course, so many other ethnic nationalities there. Now, the last we can actually say, the last attempt that the federal government made to address these issues was to call stakeholders together, and that was the Confab of 2014, and various resolutions were reached at that Confab. But the big question is, the resolutions, where are they today? Will our successive governments after the Goodluck Jonathan administration, will they abide with those resolutions? So that maybe to an extent the issues relating to ethnic agitations will be bettered. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Frank Ehiosu, for joining on the program today this morning on ITV. All right, so the issue of ethnic agitations has been long, and restructuring has been one way that analysts have said we can actually end ethnic agitations in Nigeria. I want you to pick it up from there.
Yeah, it's been part of our history from the outset. Restructuring, of course, quite a word in use, and it fits in, no doubt, because if the term restructuring is used, it speaks to the fact that there's already a structure, but there are challenges with the structure. The structure possibly underperforms, possibly is not delivering as much as is expected. So the structure needs to be readjusted, should be altered for better delivery. And that's the purport of that word. And looking at it from the Nigerian context, it's been on for so long a time. I'll attempt to give it a bit of perspective. We had a headway from the outset. Looking at governance from the standpoint of systems of government. When our founding fathers held various meetings, both locally and the ones they went for in the UK and wherever, central to their school of thought was the diversity that is inherent in Nigeria as a collective. Because we weren't always a group of people living together in that sense. We were rather different groups, different ethnic groups with different proclivities, different cultures, not tens, possibly even beyond hundreds. But by the fortune of fate, we didn't invite the colonial masters to come take us from at several points and put us together. They came of their own accord, driven, of course, by economic interest and avarice. Yeah. The UK was the one that championed it. Unfortunately, in the history of mankind, they have the record of being the greatest empire. Not even the Roman or the Babylonian Empire or the Greek Empire had the leverage of covering 1/4 of the world. So in human history, it's only the United Kingdom that has a record of being able to lead, take charge, as in oversee the affairs of a quarter of the entire human inhabited planet. So, like I said, we didn't ask them to come in. They came and they took over the system. Yeah. We were monarchists. And by some dint of happenstance, Lord Lugard gave us the name that he chose to give us. Now, something that I even want to highlight on the peculiar note, just a peculiar decision between Nigeria and Ghana, for example, in highlighting this clamor by the ethnic nationalities. If you see, the same Britons colonized the Ghanaians. They gave them a name called Gold Coast. Yeah. But when Kwame Nkrumah came on board in 1957, he gave the country a new name. And he chose Ghana as a name because it has ties with their histories, with their history, where they are coming from. But when Nigeria gained independence in 1960, nobody had the audacity to attempt to change a name. That is because of the peculiar diversity of the Nigerian system. Lugard gave the collective, after the amalgamation, the name Nigeria.
Yeah.
We had great founding fathers with intellectual capacity that you could almost term as unrivaled. The Obafemi Awolowos, the Nnamdi Azikiwes, the Ahmadu Bellos, the Tafawa Balewas, the Enaros who moved the motion for independence. None of them gave consideration to changing that name because that was not the priority. Because inherent in the diverse groups is their peculiarities. So the fact that there was already a name given by a stranger, we didn't opt to come together. That stranger brought us together. We retain that name. What is of priority to us is, to a large extent, retaining our peculiar individuality as a group, while we live in harmony as a mixed collective. So that was why, from the outset, even if Awo was the first to sell that idea quite, initially the Northern Divide, led by Ahmadu Bello, was not quite inclined to the federal system initially, but he bought into it subsequently, when the viewpoints were highlighted about the obvious necessity. Because you cannot unite a people whose pattern of life are so distinct by forcing them to be together. The only system of government that guarantees unity in diversity is federalism. So that was why it was opted for in the First Republic. Now, it wasn't just federalism that they opted for. They opted for parliamentary federalism. Yeah. Because from the history where they were coming from, everybody had this reach, and there was mutual suspicion. People had their comparative advantage based on their regions. Everybody suspected the other. So the only way to have a government system where one man does not come to dominate everybody is a parliamentary system, where people are elected from the standpoint of being equals in the House as they are elected from their different councils or zones or locations. And they made some progress on and on and on until the unfortunate military incursion into the sphere. Yeah. In fact, sometimes I imagine, I said, the likes of Ifeanyi Uju, Kaduna and Zogu and the others who were so icked by the flaws, however minor they seem as at that time, if they were alive today, I wonder what they could have done. Because what was complained about then is infinitesimal compared to where we are today. Yeah. So it is from that standpoint I'm trying to establish that fundamental. That even when the military took over, from Aguiyi Ironsi to Gowon, to Murtala Mohammed, to Obasanjo, to Buhari, to IBB, there is always that inherent ethnicity as a core factor that is a challenge that led to the taking over of one from the other. Is innate. Because these people are diverse. You can't force them to be together. Okay, now, Aguiyi made a mistake by his decree 24th of May 1966. Isaac Jasper Adaka saw the future. You know, one of the first fighters for this ethnic nationalities that we have in our history. He's not one of the first. From independence, he's actually the first by the records. Yeah. He was a young guy, passionate young dude. He had interest in fighting for justice. Because of his interest in fighting for justice, he joined the police force. But at that time, unfortunately, he perceived that the pursuit of justice wasn't quite placed on the platform of primacy. So he had some challenges and he left. He went over to study in University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Because of his passion to fight for what was right, he contested on and on and became the president of the union. Now, there was something the guy observed. As it was there, he wasn't in his Kayama place of origin in Bayelsa. He was at the headquarters, as in within the neighborhood of the East proper. And he said, okay, why is this the case? We have the riverine areas where all the fishes are caught, so everything that pertains to fishery is gotten naturally. Yet, the fishery industry, where there's processing for export, is in Aba, so far away. Over 80 miles away from the point where they normally get the main stuff. Yeah. So he felt this is not fair to our people. When he looked around, most of the people who were employed in that sphere were people from the East, in quotes, and not his own folks. So he was perturbed. He looked at the fact that they had a boatyard in Opobo. But the headquarters office where operation was taking place was in Enugu. Yeah. So that was where his agitation started from. Unfortunately, he was concerned that this thing was bad. He led protests. In fact, as a student, he traveled all the way to Chad, Ghana, trying to garner support for what the Jaws were going through at that time. Yeah. Now, I'm going somewhere. as passionate as Isaac Jasper Adaka-Boro was about his pursuit, when there was still some modicum of civil government, democracy, as it were there, he didn't quite have the room to ventilate it on a violent note. He was still pursuing peaceful means. The only time he had the opportunity to strike on a violent note was after the military had come in through an incursion. Okay.
Now, a while ago, you tried to look at the situation, and it's more or less like that you were trying to bet it on the fact that, okay, it was because of the kind of system of government that we later had. I remember we also had the parliamentary system of government, but somehow that met its Waterloo. Now, you also looked at it that it's not quite easy. I mean, different people of ethnic nationalities, ethnic beliefs and all that, bringing them together under one nation. Now, what do you think has happened to some nations of the world? Take, for example, the United States of America. I mean, the U.S. is practicing presidential system of government the way we are doing now. And if you are talking about a country that is so multifaceted in terms of different people coming together, it's been the U.S. I mean, the U.S., the whole world is represented in the U.S., and yet it's one nation. So what has happened to the U.S. that probably has not happened to us? Is it a civil war? The U.S. had their civil war. We've also had a fair share of the civil war. And what is it?
No, I think the discourse is in a different context. First of all, I didn't quite say that it's not easy to the extent that there's no solution. Yeah, that's why I said that was the essence of federalism.
Yeah, but it seems to be the genesis of this agitation for ethnic nationalities and all.
There are so many countries that have emerged on such note that survived. Comparing Nigeria and the U.S. is wonderful. The U.S., fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, does not or did not enjoy the kind of peculiar diversity that Nigerians had. When General George Washington led his colony, as at the time they fought for independence, they were just 13 colonies or 13 states. They came together. The bulk of them they shared similarities in terms of culture, in terms of religion. I'm just trying to point to something, that even if America opted for federalism, which is good where there's some bit of diversity or extreme diversity, American diversity is a learner compared to what we have in Nigeria.
And it's their strength.
No, diversity is strength anywhere where federalism is practiced according to the rules. So the challenge is not federalism in practice or the parliamentary system of federalism. The challenge we have in Nigeria is the law has been put on the back seat. In any system of government you uphold, and funny enough, there's no one stone or one system fits all. Even if it is accepted universally that democracy is the best system of government, when except from the standpoint of representation. Its popularity dates back to Grecian, the days of Greece, as far back at the time of Solon, about 500 BC, where it was prioritized on the fact that let the people have a say. They make a choice of who will lead them, because that promotes the sense of inclusion, where whatever it is that goes on, they see it as being their own, they are part of the process. So that is it. But that was not removed from the fact that other systems of government do not thrive in other places. But a core factor for any government to thrive, however the system is the primacy of law. Whether it's communism, is aristocracy, peculiar autocracy, monarchy, any system of government. However the system is that people choose to adopt, the primacy placed on the law that they use in carrying out those functions is what matters. Now, like I said just now, Americans didn't have the kind of diversity that Nigeria has. Nigeria choosing the American system, I don't want to say Nigeria chose it. I have a different opinion. The Constitutional Assembly that was put up in 1976, and they had their sitting ongoing through Obasanjo's time and brought out their report within about 3 years. It was a military government. However, their draft was, we know very well that a military administrator, junta, or head of state will always have his way. So I see it more as an imposition of a system. Because the great founding fathers, in their capacity for critical thinking, considering the peculiarities of Nigeria, shows the federal system of government, not just federal, the federal parliamentary system of government.
We're still trying to trail the American system, the reason why it has worked for them and it's probably not working with us in Nigeria. I want to continue.
I started by saying that the American system however diverse they were, in quote, I said they are not a tenth as diverse as the Nigerian system when we emerged.
Yeah.
They were barely 13 colonies or 13 states, even if they became 50 states in 1949.
Make you up in mind. Just go on.
They became 50 states in 1949. They started as 13 states, and they share similarity in religion. So many things have, even you go by their constitution at the time it was set up.
Yeah.
It was more like a, in quote, a Christian state, even if it's a secular state as it were presently. But I'm just trying to put a perspective to their emergence. But they opted for federalism and it worked. It didn't work because they're Americans. It worked because primacy was placed on the law.
Yeah.
The founding fathers placed primacy on the law. Now, they didn't just place primacy. They made relevant laws in anticipation of the possibility of some dictator or emperor trying to emerge in the system. They impute laws to ensure that the people's freedom, some way, somehow, is guaranteed. That's why they have both the First and the Second Amendment. In the US presently, no matter how inclined somebody is, I don't want to mention a man that I don't quite fancy who is inclined pursuing that office. Now, no matter, even if he chooses to be Hitler, the founding fathers already ensured the checkmate.
Yeah.
Because the people of their own accord, by their right of self-defense, can stand for what is appropriate for their country and the future.
Yeah. Now, there's something, Mr. Frank, there's something we must quickly look at here. You know, there are federal laws in America, and of course we also have state laws. But the question is, how come we still have federal laws superseding state laws? Those state laws seem to be...
You interrupted me.
Yeah,
I was trying to just create a perspective about the American system. Because if you compare Nigeria and America in terms of a presidential system of government, it's a case of comparing a goat with an elephant. No, that is not even fair. Yeah. Because it will seem like both of them are living things. It's more like a case of comparing a stone with an elephant. In this case, America being the elephant, while Nigeria being the stone that doesn't have the fundamentals of humanity as a living thing. Yeah. Now, in that adoption in 1979, when the presidential system was imposed upon us, there was a perception that they took advantage of. You see, there was the Civil War. The First Republic broke down, unfortunately. And Obasanjo being a military man, there has already been about 10 years of military being in charge in the country. In their own thinking, they felt that they needed a centralized system where there was some power to ensure that everybody was put in check. That was a fundamental driving force for the adoption of that presidential system of government. Not necessarily prioritizing the system to ensure the best for the people in terms of the practice of democracy or federalism, as the case may be. So they imposed it and people accepted it. Unfortunately, in their thinking, they didn't know or possibly did not consider the fact that there is no nation state that can survive on the basis of the discretion of its leader. In the history of mankind, nation states survive on the basis of laws. The index of a nation's law enforcement is proportional to the sustainability of that nation state. Thomas Hobbes wrote this piece in 1651, the Leviathan, and he was very categorical about it. But for laws, it will be a case of where is a war of all against all, where life is short, poor, nasty, brutish. So the only thing that keeps us out of that terrain of swimming towards the state of nature is law. What gives vitality to law is law enforcement. Yeah. So the mistake of adopting that presidential system, now see the American system. In the US, anybody can vie for any office. If you want to vie for a president, apart from Donald Trump is the richest president I ever contended for that office so far. Yeah. Obama was not what, I'm not sure it was what much more than the average civil servant in the US when he contested. Because the system is participatory. However expensive it is, everybody is responsible for the cost. Is that the case in Nigeria? Secondly, the concept of universal suffrage is prioritized. Vote count. Does vote count in Nigeria? It may count a little. I don't know the extent to which you can estimate that, but we'll get to that point. So, the American system, a presidential system of government has a fundamental. What is that fundamental? Checks and balances. In the parliamentary system, you have the option of a vote of confidence or vote of no confidence. When the parliamentary system, in the presidential system where you have checks and balances, where does that come from? It comes only from the legislature. The reason why the Americans voted for a presidential system is because to a large extent, there's some bit more of stability. Because the people who hold the president to account the most are the voters. That is how this presidential system is structured. So even when the House of Rep or the Senate or the Congress, as the case maybe, want to impeach the president, the process is cumbersome. They must go through certain processes to ensure that they don't just wake up from the blues and just choose to remove a man elected by the people. So that is why the presidential system of government ensures that every 4 years, the capacity, the frequency, the sense of judgment of the man that they elected is put to test.
Yeah.
And if people want him, he could continue. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, that universal suffrage was, it wasn't stolen. It was not given to us from the outset. In the Second Republic, how did the election go? Everybody knew how it went. The controversies before the court intervened, and even the issue over the tutor, there was a special mathematical calculation that was introduced in that judgment that gave Barry the victory. Because we had 19 states, and they had to two-thirds of 19, two-thirds of 18 will be 6. So if you have 19, two-thirds will bring fractions. So where will you create the fraction to get that stuff?
But INEC, let's leave all that.
No, I just rephrase it for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Now, the point is that in Nigeria now, universal suffrage is out of it. What we have presently, unfortunately, I make bold to say, is electoral monarchy. Obasanjo imposed it upon us. Unfortunately, he was even the chief beneficiary too. Because when he came in the Second Republic in 1999, he is the one that spearheaded that concept, and it was carried over in the Second Republic, and is the prime beneficiary in the Fourth Republic.
Okay.
Now, in this Fourth Republic, have you seen any governor or president that is held to account? If the fundamental of checks and balances do not serve its purpose, what now is the essence of presidential system of government?
Okay.
It only leads us to the blues.
Yeah, Frankie, so let us not forget where we're coming from now, and so that we can begin to look at some of the attempts that the federal government, even if we are trying to say that there are questions around universal adult suffrage here, you call it is electoral monarchy. That's what you call it now. But let's look at the attempt that the federal government has made. 2014 Confab is still very fresh in our minds, and it's the last attempt we can point out to now. Because the government gave Nigerians the opportunity.
I have a copy of the document.
It's everywhere. It's a public document.
I know that. I'm just referencing it.
Resolutions were reached at that Confab. Now I think what I would like you to know, there's no way Nigeria as a nation will forget that Confab in history. We'll keep on referring to it and all that. Now,
we are giving it too much reference.
Yeah. Don't you think? Are there needs? For us to go back to that Confab. Let us devoid it from politics now.
Yeah, devoid of politics. Who set up the Confab?
The presidency then?
Goodluck Jonathan.
Yeah.
He set up the Confab. He still had over a year as the president. Did he ever make the report public consideration, or did he even give any face to it? So it's unfortunate that's why I said we are giving too much reference to it, because from the outset it wasn't meant to serve any peculiar purpose. They have wonderful resolutions they reached. But however wonderful resolutions were, I am telling you with all sense of confidence that even if they implement them, it will only be thus far.
Really?
It will only be thus far.
Why?
Now, see, we are entangled presently in the Nigerian system. We're entangled.
Now, let me explain this. Which aspect of our entanglement do you think that Confab did not handle?
In my candid opinion, if the Confab had made recourse to the critical opinion, the choice of the founding fathers, it will be worthwhile.
What are they?
I still emphasize the fundamental of parliamentary federalism, parliamentary system of government. Because what we have now, like I said, is electoral monarchy. And unfortunately, things don't stay the way they are. That's the law of nature. They tend to improve. And what you call improvement most of the time is a case of getting worse, depending on who is benefiting. So as Nigeria is now, we are getting worse on the political trajectory. See, let me land somewhere. In 1999, for those who contested, the cost of contesting for House of Assembly or House of Rep, or even governorship, by 2003, the cost had not doubled, it had tripled. By 2007, quadruple does not describe what had happened. Right now, I'm sure mathematicians need to sit down to create a special software to calculate the purport of the increase. Why is that so? It's because of the system we practice. Now, in this system we practice, every time, when I look at EFCC, I pity for them. I pity for them. Because if we continue on this trajectory, the best EFCC can do is that they'll be catching some Yahoo boys every once in a while. then maybe 1 or 2 persons who are not in the good books of the center, you'll give them body heat. That is the best that can happen.
Whereas there are people that are out to be caught.
There's people that have to be caught. Look at the history from 1999 till date. EFCC was set up in 2004, during the time of Olusegun Obasanjo. Since it has been set up, apart from those who are not in the good books of the center, who has been prosecuted? It's in public domain. Babajide Totitoju, the TVC reporter, he has said it a number of times on live broadcast that Nuhu Ribadu, as EFCC chairman, when Olabode's judge's case was on there, that Nuhu Ribadu told them as journalists that there's no way he has the file, but he can't bring it out because Baba may not approve it, so he will not have the guts to bring it out. That the only way he can pursue the investigation is if it's brought to the public glare. So they now published the detail, the press man. That was when Nuhu Ribadu could now back on investigating the guy because he was close to Baba. Now, compare that to South Africa. How many presidents have left their offices now? Some have gone to prison. When you have a political system where the head cannot be held to account, how can you be sure of any form of future or certainty in processes?
But that seems to be changing in South Africa now. I mean, with recent development with Cyril Ramaphosa, I mean, how he got through the farm gates issue.
No, it's not true.
No, I mean, we all saw it.
No, what I say is not true is that
Cyril Ramaphosa for the first time, you know, the ANC. I mean, this last election, I mean.
No, they won. He had a challenge.
But they lost, if not that they
lost their overwhelming majority.
Yeah.
That speaks to the power of the people.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. So let's not keep on making South Africa as a reference.
No, it's a good reference. I made reference to South Africa in a context. I said, is there any Nigerian president that has been held to account? South African presidents have gone to prison. Even Ramaphosa are talking about, his case is still there. Therefore, I'm sure in this is second tenure, the thing may pop up because the evidence they put forth in the past could not quite hold him down. See the difference between Nigeria and South Africa. In South Africa, they have the office of the public prosecutor. It's just like we have the FCC here. Now, the public prosecutor, the person that held Jacob Zuma to account, is a young lady. If you see her size, you not think that she can go hurt a fly. But she made the #1 citizen to end up in prison. Because it's not about the position you occupy, it's about the primacy of the law. But in Nigeria, read the FCC Act. The FCC as an anti-corruption organization is tied to the apron string of the presidency. If the administrator does not like the chairman, it's only a matter of time. It's either you are removed before your time and you likely end up in prison. It's only Nuhu Ribadu that has not been held up or arrested after his service as FCC chairman. And he would have been arrested, he ran out of the country. It was bike he used to cross border.
All right, so that's an allegation.
No, it's not allegation, it's in the public domain.
Yeah, but,
okay, Farida was saying the lady wasn't held up, but of course we knew cases that came up. Yeah. Now, we have to have a system. See Israel. Prime Minister of Israel, if I'm a citizen in a country, how will I know that the law is fair to all and sundry? If I see a policeman that can interview me or interrogating my Prime Minister, will I not have faith in the system?
Okay, now, Mr. Frank.
But you have a system, a presidential system, like I say, it's a monarchy.
Yeah, Mr. Hill, so let's look at the issue of resource control, because you are trying to opine that not until we go back to a parliamentary system of government, we may not get it right.
No, let me learn on that. Yeah, not exactly. You see, the journey of nationhood is not to a destination. The journey of nationhood is a continuous one.
It's a process.
It's a process.
Yeah.
So you don't have to become this suddenly, but there can be steps taken to fit in. This coalition of indigenous ethnic nationalities, they've submitted their proposals to the president.
Yeah, but one thing that is so conspicuous now, I mean, glaring to the eyes of all Nigerians, you know, are the issues surrounding resource control. I mean, that seems to have been the cruise of this ethnic agitation.
And it didn't start today.
Yeah.
It's been on from time immemorial. It was the 1946 Richard's Constitution that gave flesh to some of those fundamentals, because that was what primed the concept of federalism in Nigeria. And the Oliver Littleton Constitution, of course, crowned it up. The first commission that was set up on this issue of resource control, it was Phillipson's commission in 1946. And he highlighted 3 fundamentals on the basis of which resources should be allocated. The first was derivation. The second was even progress. The third was population. And
derivation, which Nigeria adopted?
No. As at the time he put that forth, it was adopted. It was before independence. That was in 1946. In 1951, they had another commission's report on that. Higgs and Phillipson Commission report. They went a bit further on that note. as in, did some adjustment when necessary as it pertains to population, derivation, and whatnot. In 1953, they had the Chicks Commission report. But in 1958, was the one that crowned it up. That was the one who carried over after independence. That was the Reisman's Commission report. It was that one that introduced a new component that ensures some sense of justice. That report on resource allocation introduced what they call distributable income. Distributable income. So, as at the time we got independence, we adopted it. Now, the format varies, but I will attempt to put it in context.
Yeah.
For most resources, like mineral resources, like oil in the south, some stuff they had in north and other parts of the country, the regions normally were entitled to 50% of whatever it is that they produce, while 50% goes to the center. Yeah. There were certain components of resources that the regions take 100% for the purpose of addressing special issues like police, education, and some other stuff, left, right, and say, and whatnot. So, but that 50% that goes to the center, 30% of it goes to that account that guy introduced, Reisman's Commission's report, the redistributable income, which is redistributable in the sense that it could go across all the regions on certain parameters. Yeah. Why this government at the center had charge of 20%. That was successfully held on until the incursion by the military. Funny enough, between 1960 and 1966, it's in the records. The regions in Nigeria were about the fastest growing, not in Africa, in the world. When you mention the Western Republic at that time, you don't mention even South Korea. You don't reference, is it Taiwan you want to reference, or is it Singapore? There was progress because the system was structured to ensure that everybody could attain their best based on their peculiarities and their priorities. You are in the North, where religion is frontal in terms of cultural distinction. Yeah. You can't play with it. Yeah. When Obafemi went to campaign before the 1959 elections, he went with a clear intent. He is a social democrat. And for him, he didn't fancy the fact that over there was special entitlement to certain places, and that's discussed for another day. Yeah. But the prime point is that they had differences. After his campaign in the North, because of the impact, the Sultan, Ahmadu Bello, was so pissed. After they finished one campaign, and when he used handkerchief to clean his nose, he saw dust coming out. And he said, he, a prince, going to campaign to bare mortals. And it was Awos' approach to campaign that compelled Ahmadu Bello to go and start campaigning. And he made a promise. It was detailed in the papers then, the Sunday Times, December 2nd, in 1959. He was so plain that he said, because of what Awolo did, he was going to ensure that his lieutenants were going to be installed to be the ones to superintend over affairs in the side. I'm just trying to express the peculiarity of the parliamentary system, where everybody could make the most that he could of his region, and expunge would get on the other side based on democratic principles. But see where we are today. Okay, let me, anytime I recall Singapore, it pains me so dumb. So then. In 1965, if you read Lee Yu's book, he wrote about it in his piece, From Third World to First World. Yeah. Singapore was a country not to be reckoned with. They were barely pushed away from Malaysia, then Malaya, looking for support, investment. All the places was going to Europe and Germany, the major powers. They told him they were not interested in coming to invest in Singapore. The major source of revenue or resource that they had was a British seaport. After they were pushed out, the British left the seaport.
Yeah, but they turned the nation around.
See this, that is the story. Yeah. All right, a small population. Today, as we are talking, we are here seated. Singapore, a small country, about the size of Edo State. Their population is about 5.7 million. Singapore contributes more to global trade than the whole of Africa. By present estimate, African contribution to global trade is barely 3%, while Singapore contributes 6%. Okay. All right. So the budget of Singapore this year, Nigerian budget, when they did it, dollar was about 7 and something naira by the estimate when they did the budget. So as at that time, when converted, it could sum up to about $30 billion. About. But by the present exchange rate, Nigerian budget is less than $20 billion. Okay. Singapore, with a population of barely 5.7 million people, their budget is over $83 billion. I'm comparing them with Edo State. You see, development comes from definite effort put in by people, driven by the desire to ensure that there is change. Okay. But the Nigerian system, as it is, I make bold to say, from 1999 till date, look at the statistics, look at the trajectory. We are going further down. There is no indication that things will change.
Mr. Frank, let's look at issues surrounding the most recent of it all now, the insecurity insurgency, you may call it, and all that. Now, authority in Nigeria has said that it is external in the sense that this spans into the lecture coming into Nigeria and all that. And some persons have also said that it's also related to the issue of resource control and all that. So in all these controversies, how do we begin to find a kind of a rest to these ethnic agitations in Nigeria?
First of all the agitations in question are simply a case of people protesting against a system they don't believe in, or that is not just to them. Ethnic agitations, banditry, militancy, they are all methods of expressing that dissatisfaction. You see, in a functional nation state, it is only government that has the force of coercion. But in Nigeria today, the force of coercion is so dispersed. In fact, it's so disaggregated that there are some parts of the country where you seem as if the government does not go close to. And it's the truth. Niger State is the biggest state in Nigeria, the largest state in Nigeria, almost a tenth of the country. There are parts of that state, even the governor with security men going with him would be scared to go to.
I mean, the soldiers hosting their flag.
Of course, they have their flags there. I'm saying even the military, it's just too painful. All these things are offshoot of this challenge. If the center is not addressed, for everybody to see that sense of oneness and believe in the system that is good for all and sundry, we will keep swimming around this pool. That's why I told you just now that even the 2014 National Confab, could just be, even when implemented, we just go toss far. The purport will be so infinitesimal in terms of the impact on our evolution as a nation state. Going back to the issue of insecurity, it beats my imagination hollow. Related to resource control, like we said just now. You see, there are more than 15 countries. In fact, in Africa now, they should be counting about 5 or 6, if not more, that are oil-producing nations. You have Saudi Arabia, you have Qatar, you have Russia. Among all the countries where they produce crude oil, Nigeria is the only country where they steal crude oil. Last year, it's in the papers, a few months ago, the National Security Advisor said in the public domain that on a daily basis, about 400,000 barrels of crude oil is stolen from Nigeria. If you do that calculation by the conservative budget rate for crude oil sales per barrel, $75 times 400,000. What it means, my brother, is that Nigeria as a country is losing 45 billion every day, multiplied by 30 or 31. People that are non-state actors, they steal more money from Nigeria than federal, state, and local government share on a monthly basis. And I have bothered to ask, if the president, like they say, is very courageous, why doesn't he have the balls to deal with this issue? We are going to borrow money from IMF, borrow money from World Bank, borrow money from left, right, and center. Right now, debt to revenue is about 89%. By implication, even the revenue that the country gets is barely 10% that is left to address anything that pertains to nationhood. Yet, a few people steal our crude to the tune of 45 billion naira every day. How much do they share, in fact? Sometimes, because of the ruble subsidy that's increased, about 1.something trillion or thereabout. If you calculate the money they steal on a monthly basis, most times it's more than the amount that they share for all the tiers of government. Where does that take place? Unfortunately, there is no possibility of stealing crude oil, but for those who are protected by government. I'm able to say. Experts in the field have spoken over and over and again. Nigeria is the only country that produces crude oil. And the way they steal it now, how come it wasn't going on like that during Obasanjo's time or during the military era? It is not a business. So it is painful that we have so much, but our leaders are going to borrow to put our future kids and grandkids in terrible state, all because they don't have the balls to hold to account those who are siphoning our resources when government is supposed to be the sole owner of the force of coercion.
Okay, a while ago, you tried to look look at the issue of resource control.
Now, on the issue of resource control, you know, up to 1966, the Residence Commission's report was still operational. On the 24th of May, 1966, that was when Agitations made his decree 34, the unification decree so-called. So that distorted the resource control arrangement. Even with the distortion, unfortunately, it didn't really stop the 50% that the regions still retained. Even if he changed and named them to a group of provinces, whatever it is, because he didn't like the title of region when what they used to, what Abacha used to use there in his time. Dissolve. There's a word they used to use.
Holy Faith or whatever?
No. I'm trying to use the words Abacha used when he did school, when he was dismantling every structure.
Okay, decrease.
Decrease. No, yeah. There's a word they use in removing all the structure. It just slipped my mind.
I hereby dissolved.
It's the same word that Agitations used
to
deal with those regions, all the 84 or so political parties then and all whatnot. So the 50% that was now going to the center, based on the unification decree and the fact that it was not a unitary system, the regions will not quite have the audacity to ask for that their component, the 30% distributive income. That 30% actually had a formula for its sharing. As at the time they did it, the North, based on population and certain strategic advantages, was entitled to 40% of that 30%. The West was entitled to 24%. The East was entitled to 31%. When Midwest came on board, they were entitled to the remaining percentage. If you had 40, 24, and 31, what was left? Now, but when this guy came on board, after brought about unification, that was out of it. Unfortunately, Gowon took over. When Gowon took over, war began. Not too long afterwards. Gowon equally now made his own decrees because he needed money to prosecute the war and to equally rebuild. So he appealed to the regions through the military heads of military governors or administrators as it were then. The component that pertains to the one that the regions get their 50%, representing their 50%, were reduced to 45%. Then he made a decree in 1970, they made it around 1971, where the offshore component was reserved entirely for the center, all because, like I said, he gave excuse to or appeal to the regions. They wanted to use it to rebuild the country. Murtala Mohammed came on board and did the second to the last damage. He cut it down. What goes to the, as at Murtala Mohammed's time, the state, number of states had increased. You don't go on increase the regions, created states to promote peace. He created River State, for example, to win over the support of people like Isaac Jasper Atakaburu. Atakaburu was in prison then. He was sentenced to death ordinarily. It was fortunate that there was that coup that took place. If not, he may have died not too long from then.
Yeah.
It was barely 26 when he even struck. So that state was created, and he led, based on his competency with the Creeks, the army of his guys that were in prison together went to pursue that. So they created, the state increased them to 8, later to 12 and all. Now, Murtala Mohammed reduced it to 20%. But a certain, I always hold this view. Now, people that say Obasanjo is a great guy, I tell you that the damage Obasanjo did to Nigeria, the South, especially from the stem of resource control, no northern military leader did it. That is the truth.
How do you mean?
What was left of the resource control that is supposed to be held by the state in terms of derivation was knocked out completely. It was during the time of IDP that there was a semblance of an attempt to bring back a bit of it. And I introduced the Umpadek Commission then, so that some fraction could be taken to guarantee the development of the Niger Delta region. Then Abacha was the one that edged it up to the 30% component, which has been adopted afterwards in this Fourth Republic, just for reference sake. But there are resources all over the country because of the incompetence of government, unfortunately. See this security we are talking about. It is reported that there is no airport in Zamfara. Yet, people are able to steal natural resources and they use aircraft to take it across to other parts of the world.
So let's look at one more thing now. The issue of constitutional amendments. I mean, it has been in progress. We had sometime in 1999, that's one reference point, and the recent electoral reforms also boils down to some attempts to amend sections of the constitution, all for restructuring in Nigeria. Now, what would you want to say about this quickly?
On the issue of constitutional amendment, in my opinion, like I said from the outset, the ultimate intent should be to take it back to where we started from. It can't be exactly the way it was, no doubt, but the system that will ensure that there's participation of all and sundry.
Yeah, but we're looking at the complexities that has grown over time.
Complexities don't undermine the laws. What you do is to adjust according to ensure that the laws are implemented duly.
Are you saying that all the sections of the constitutions that have been amended that is not good?
No, they made impact, no doubt. But I said only thus far. Sometimes the impact they make us, they are such that we take 3 steps forward and 7 steps backward. Okay, let me give you an instance, for example.
Don't you think
the 1976 local government reform that Murtala Mohammed introduced? You see some people talking about it, even scholars, giving it so much kudos, that local government should be a tier of government. And I said, what's a conflagration of political cacophony? Federalism is defined in very simple context, the world over. It speaks of a coordinate system. How do you come to Nigeria and you not have a triordinate system? Coordinate in the sense that you have 2 layers of authority. You have the federal and the state. And in classical definition, they are co-equal tiers of government.
Yeah, but the peculiarity of Nigeria.
See my point. In Nigeria, unfortunately, so much of what we call growth has always been cancer. Cancer is a growth. But what makes it different is that it's unregulated. So many things have been done in this country, measures taken by political leaders, have been cancerous, rather than addressing the core issue. It's just like the 10 police had challenges. Rather than deal with the issues of police in terms of proper reforms and ensure transparency and accountability, they created another institution. They've created about 4 more since the challenges were there, unfortunately. The more they create the institutions, the more the challenges they're trying to address are replicated. In Japan, when they had the similar challenges, what did they do? When they had similar challenges, they ensured transparency. At some point in time, they created police stations where everybody sees what the police is doing. Because they say evil only thrives in secrecy. That is the truth. So for government to thrive from the standpoint of democracy is to open the doors, allow transparency to take prominence. Now, coming back to that point, Murtala Mohammed made the decree in 1976. We are supposed to be a federal system. But we are forcing a unity system on Nigeria. We are not Ghana. We are so diverse. In an attempt to force it, how can you say every government should grow or develop equally? It's impossible. Today now, see the kind of system we have. Some states have, for some government created by an individual. The US we copy from. In the United States, they have 2 tiers of government. State and federal. In some states, they have 4 more levels. In some, they have 2 more levels. In some, they have as much as 5 or 6 more levels. They have councils, they have local government, they have special purpose government, different level. In fact, because it's meant to make government closer to the people. But it's not the responsibility of the national level. How could you come as a federal government? And see, the federal government has soon states to court in the Supreme Court. I say, another attempt at a cancerous growth. Federal government, do the right thing. Are we practicing federalism, which is a coordinate system of government? The problem is not about states, governors taking advantage of local government. They take advantage because the laws allows for such to take place.
Okay. All right. So, discussion here this morning, so long a time, Mr. Frank Ehiosue. But we have to go because of time now. We have less than. Okay, I'll just allow you 30 seconds quickly.
Yeah, my point is this: is the president fought for democracy. Like him or hate him, I don't fancy him quite. But he has a record of being one of the major financiers of Nadeco. And if you peruse the Nadeco blueprints, they were very cool. They were inclined to restructuring and all that will pertain to what we are talking about presently. He has emerged now as a president. I beg of him, Mr. President. If he does not take those steps to repair Nigeria, the shame upon him will not be similar to that of Buhari. Buhari never fought for democracy. He was not a promoter of rule of law. But he has been a promoter of rule of law and a fighter for democracy and restructuring and resource control. Yeah, but 1 year is gone already.
Yeah.
He should bring us back to where we used to be. He was an Awoist. Awo stood for peculiar political ideology.
So we should go back. So we should go back to the old time of the parliamentary.
It should be adjusted in phases. The coalition of indigenous national coalition of indigenous ethnic nationalities. They made a proposal, very comprehensive. It's strategic.
So we'll take that as your own opinion. I mean, as your own.
I recall in 2010 when they did one vote rally. I was at the airport. I was in the organizing committee. I was at the airport to receive him. When they came in, he came in his private jet himself. Bisi Akande, Lai Mohammed, and Professor Olesha.
10 seconds now.
He asked when he came. I told him that IPP was at the stadium. They sat in the VIP lounge for about 20 minutes. A few of them were still telling me, let's go, we are here already. The guy said, no, that
right,
so, so a man with such vision who did not come for such a rally because of what IBB stood for. We should do Nigeria.
We want to say thank you. So we take your own submission on restructuring Nigeria as your own recommendation, because it's a continuous process. We allow people to come here to look at the issues and probably make their recommendations. We just hope and pray that the authority involved in restructuring Nigeria will listen and look at all these things. Of course, all of us all must put hands together as one nation to restructure Nigeria.